It all started on a rainy Friday evening. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth, and the jazz tunes playing softly in the background created an atmosphere that was both soothing and seductive. My wife Laura had left for a business trip, leaving me alone in our cozy apartment. I didn't mind the solitude. In fact, I often cherished these moments of peace. But this time, the night held an unexpected twist. Laura's mother, Eleanor, was staying with us for a few days. She was a striking woman in her late 50s, with silver hair that framed her face elegantly and eyes that seemed to hold 1,000 secrets. Eleanor had always been warm and friendly towards me, but there was something different about her tonight. She wore a silky, deep red dress that clung to her curves, and her perfume was a tantalizing mix of floral and musk. As I sat on the couch sipping a glass of wine, Eleanor walked in and smiled at me. "Mind if I join you?" she asked, her voice smooth and inviting. "Of course not," I replied, gesturing to the seat next to me. She sat down and we chatted about mundane things, work, the weather, Laura's trip. But there was an undercurrent to our conversation, a tension that neither of us acknowledged but both felt. The rain pattered against the windows and the jazz music seemed to sync with the rhythm of our hearts. Eleanor leaned closer, her hand brushing against mine as she reached for her wine glass. I felt a jolt of electricity at her touch, a spark that ignited something deep within me. I glanced at her, and our eyes locked for a moment longer than usual. There was a flicker of something in her gaze, desire perhaps. I tried to shake off the thought. This was Eleanor, my mother-in-law. But the more I tried to suppress it, the stronger the attraction grew. It was as if the jazz music was weaving a spell around us, pulling us closer together. "Do you like jazz?" Eleanor asked, her voice low and husky. "I do," I admitted, trying to keep my tone casual. "It's very sensual." She smiled, a knowing glint in her eyes. "Yes, it is. There's something about the smooth rhythms that just takes you away." I nodded, feeling my pulse quicken. The room felt warmer, the air thicker. I could feel the magnetic pull between us, and it took all my willpower to stay seated. Eleanor leaned in again, her shoulder brushing against mine. Her scent enveloped me, intoxicating and irresistible. "Would you like to dance?" she asked suddenly, her voice barely above a whisper. My heart skipped a beat. "Dance?" "Yes," she said, standing up and holding out her hand. "Just to dance, nothing more." I hesitated for a moment, but then I took her hand. Her grip was firm yet gentle, and as I stood up I felt a surge of excitement. We moved to the center of the living room, and Eleanor slipped her arms around my neck, pulling me close. I placed my hands on her waist, feeling the warmth of her body through the thin fabric of her dress. The music flowed around us, a slow, sensual melody that seemed to mirror the beating of our hearts. We swayed together, our bodies moving in perfect harmony. I could feel every curve of her body against mine, and it was driving me wild. I tried to focus on the music, on the rhythm, but all I could think about was Eleanor. Her breath was warm against my ear as she whispered, "You dance very well." "Thank you," I murmured, my voice strained. "You too." She pulled back slightly, just enough to look into my eyes. Her gaze was intense, filled with the desire that mirrored my own. For a moment I forgot who she was, forgot everything but the need that was burning inside me. I leaned in, closing the distance between us, and our lips met in a soft, tentative kiss. It was a gentle brush at first, but the spark between us ignited into a flame. The kiss deepened, our mouths moving together with a hunger that had been building all evening. I pulled her closer, my hand sliding down her back, feeling the silk of her dress against my fingertips. Eleanor's hands tangled in my hair and she pressed herself against me, her body melding with mine. The world outside ceased to exist. There was only the music, the rain, and the two of us. The kiss was everything, passionate, desperate, and filled with a longing that neither of us could deny. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathless, our hearts racing. Eleanor looked up at me, her eyes dark with desire. "This is wrong," she whispered, but there was no conviction in her voice. "Yes," I agreed, my voice hoarse, "but it feels so right." She nodded, and in that moment, we both knew that we had crossed a line. There was no going back now. The night was ours, and we were caught in the smooth rhythms of jazz, lost in a dance of temptation and desire. The kiss we shared was a beginning, a forbidden initiation that neither of us could resist. When our lips parted, the gravity of what we had done began to settle, but the magnetic pull between us remained. Eleanor and I stood in the middle of the living room, the jazz music still weaving its spell, and the rain outside creating a cocoon of intimacy. I could see the conflict in her eyes, mirroring my own, but the desire was undeniable. Eleanor took a step back, her breath coming in shallow gasps. She looked vulnerable, almost uncertain, and for a moment I feared she might regret what had just happened. But then she reached out and touched my face, her fingers gentle against my skin. "What are we doing?" she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "I don't know," I admitted, my heart pounding, "but I can't stop thinking about you." Her eyes softened, and she gave me a small, almost sad smile. "I can't stop thinking about you either." The confession hung between us, a truth that neither of us could ignore. The tension in the room was palpable, and I knew that we were standing on the precipice of something dangerous and exhilarating. I wanted her more than anything, but I also knew the risks involved. "Eleanor," I said softly, "if we do this, there's no turning back." She nodded, her expression resolute. "I know, but right now, I don't care." With those words, the last of my hesitation melted away. I closed the distance between us, capturing her lips in another kiss, this one more urgent and desperate than the first. Her arms wrapped around my neck, pulling me closer, and I could feel her heart beating against my chest. We moved together, our bodies entwined as we stumbled towards the bedroom. The journey was a blur of kisses and touches, the need between us growing stronger with every step. When we finally reached the room, we paused for a moment, staring at each other with a mixture of desire and trepidation. "Are you sure?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," she replied, her eyes burning with intensity. "I'm sure." With that, we crossed the threshold into a realm of passion and intimacy. The room was dimly lit, the only light coming from the street lamp outside casting a soft glow through the curtains. Eleanor reached for the buttons of my shirt, her fingers trembling slightly as she undid them one by one. I watched her, mesmerized by the sight of her undressing me, and the anticipation made my blood run hot. When my shirt was off, she ran her hands over my chest, her touch sending shivers down my spine. I leaned in and kissed her neck, tasting the salt of her skin and inhaling her intoxicating scent. She moaned softly, her body arching towards mine, and I felt a surge of desire that threatened to consume me. I slipped my hands under the straps of her dress, slowly sliding them off her shoulders. The fabric pooled at her feet, revealing the lace lingerie she wore underneath. She was breathtaking, and for a moment all I could do was stand there and marvel at her beauty. "Eleanor," I murmured, my voice filled with awe. She smiled, a blush coloring her cheeks. "Touch me," she whispered, her voice a plea. I didn't need to be told twice. I ran my hands over her body, feeling the softness of her skin and the firmness of her curves. She leaned into my touch, her eyes closing as she surrendered to the sensations. I kissed her again, our mouths moving together in a dance of passion, and we fell onto the bed, our bodies entwined. The next moments were a blur of heat and urgency. Our hands and mouths explored each other with a hunger that bordered on desperation. Every touch, every kiss was electric, igniting a fire that burned hotter with each passing second. We moved together in perfect harmony, our bodies responding to each other as if we were made for this. The jazz music still played in the background, its smooth rhythms creating a soundtrack for our lovemaking. The rain outside continued to fall, a steady beat that matched the rhythm of our hearts. Time seemed to stand still as we lost ourselves in each other, the world outside fading away until there was nothing but us. Eleanor's moans filled the room, a symphony of pleasure that spurred me on. I wanted to make her feel everything, to give her as much pleasure as she was giving me. I kissed her neck, her shoulders, her breasts, savoring the taste of her skin and the way she writhed beneath me. Her hands clutched at my back, her nails digging into my skin, and the slight pain only heightened the pleasure. We moved together, our bodies slick with sweat, the heat between us building to a fever pitch. I could feel her getting closer, her breath coming in short gasps, her body trembling with anticipation. I held her tight, my own desire reaching its peak, and together we tumbled over the edge, our cries of pleasure mingling with the music and the rain. When it was over, we lay tangled in each other's arms, our bodies still humming with the aftershocks of our lovemaking. Eleanor rested her head on my chest, her breath warm against my skin, and I held her close, not wanting the moment to end. "We shouldn't have done this," she whispered, her voice tinged with regret. I know, I replied, my heart heavy, but I don't regret it. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with a mix of emotions. Neither do I, she admitted softly. We lay there in silence, the weight of what we had done settling over us. The night was still young and the jazz music continued to play, its smooth rhythms now a reminder of our forbidden passion. We knew that the consequences would come, but for now, we held on to the moment, savoring the connection we had found in each other's arms. The next morning, the sun filtered through the curtains, casting a soft glow over the room. I woke up with Eleanor still in my arms, her head resting on my chest. For a moment, I simply lay there, enjoying the warmth of her body against mine, the rhythm of her breathing steady and comforting. But reality soon began to creep back in, and with it, the weight of what we had done. Eleanor stirred, her eyes fluttering open. She looked up at me, a mixture of contentment and concern in her gaze. "Good morning," she said softly, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "Good morning," I replied, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "How are you feeling?" She sighed, snuggling closer to me. "Conflicted, but I don't regret last night." "Neither do I said, my heart aching with the truth of my words. We lay there for a while, wrapped in the aftermath of our shared passion, but the world outside was relentless. Laura would be back soon, and we needed to face the consequences of our actions. Reluctantly, we disentangled ourselves and got dressed, the atmosphere between us heavy with unspoken words. Over breakfast, we tried to act normal, but the tension was palpable. Every glance, every accidental touch seemed charged with the memory of our night together. Eleanor's presence, once comforting and familiar, now felt like a constant reminder of the boundary we had crossed. As we sat at the kitchen table sipping coffee, Eleanor broke the silence. "We need to talk about what happened," she said, her tone serious. I nodded, my stomach knotting with anxiety. "I know, we can't let this affect Laura." "Exactly," Eleanor agreed. "We need to be careful. We can't let anyone find out." Her words made sense, but the thought of pretending nothing had happened felt unbearable. I wanted more of her, more of the connection we had shared. But I also knew that what we had done was wrong, and that continuing down this path would only lead to heartache. "Eleanor," I began, choosing my words carefully. "Last night, it was incredible, but I don't want to hurt Laura. She's the woman I love." Eleanor reached across the table and took my hand, her touch sending a familiar jolt of electricity through me. "I know," she said softly, "and I don't want to hurt her either. But what we shared, it felt real." "It was real," I admitted, my heart aching with the truth. "But we have to be smart about this. We have to find a way to move forward without causing more pain." Eleanor nodded, her eyes filled with a mixture of resolve and sorrow. "Agreed. We'll have to keep our distance, at least for now, for Laura's sake." The decision was made, but it didn't make it any easier. As the days passed, we tried to go back to normal, but the memory of that night lingered, a constant reminder of the desire that simmered just beneath the surface. One evening, a few weeks later, Laura invited Eleanor and me to a jazz club downtown. She had no idea of the significance the music held for us, or the secret we were hiding. As we sat at a table near the stage, the smooth rhythms of the jazz band washing over us, I felt the familiar pull of attraction towards Eleanor. She looked stunning, her silver hair catching the light, her eyes glinting with a secret shared between us. Laura was in high spirits, laughing and chatting, oblivious to the tension between her mother and me. As the night wore on, the music seemed to weave a spell around us once more. Eleanor and I exchanged glances, each one charged with unspoken longing. The weight of our secret was becoming too much to bear, and I could see the same struggle in her eyes. During a particularly slow and sensual song, Laura excused herself to the restroom, leaving Eleanor and me alone at the table. The moment she was out of sight, Eleanor leaned closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't stop thinking about that night," she confessed, her eyes searching mine. "Neither can I admitted, my heart pounding. "But we can't let it happen again. We promised." "I know," she said, her voice trembling, "but it's so hard." Our faces were inches apart, the pull between us almost irresistible. The music seemed to swell, wrapping us in its embrace, and for a moment, I forgot where we were. I forgot everything but the need I saw reflected in Eleanor's eyes. I wanted to kiss her, to feel her lips against mine once more, but I knew we couldn't. Not here, not now. Laura returned to the table, her presence breaking the spell. She smiled at us, oblivious to the tension, and we both quickly composed ourselves. The rest of the evening passed in a blur, my mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. The jazz music that once felt like an invitation now seemed like a cruel reminder of what we couldn't have. Back at home, Laura went to bed early, exhausted from the night's festivities. Eleanor and I lingered in the living room, the silence between us heavy with unspoken words. Finally, she turned to me, her eyes filled with determination. "We need to end this," she said, her voice firm. "We can't keep torturing ourselves like this." I nodded, knowing she was right. Agreed. It's for the best. But even as we made the decision, I knew that it wouldn't be easy. The connection we shared was too strong, the desire too intense. We would have to fight against it every day for Laura's sake. And as I watched Eleanor walk away, I couldn't help but wonder if I would ever truly be able to let her go. Despite our resolve to stay apart, the longing between Eleanor and me only grew stronger. We tried to maintain our distance, but every shared glance, every accidental touch, stoked the fire that burned within us. It was becoming unbearable, and I knew it was only a matter of time before we succumbed to our desire once more. It happened one evening when Laura was out of town again. She had gone on another business trip, leaving Eleanor and me alone in the apartment. The tension was palpable from the moment she left, a silent understanding passing between us. We spent the day trying to occupy ourselves, avoiding each other as much as possible, but the magnetic pull was too strong. As night fell, I found myself in the living room, the same jazz tunes playing softly in the background. The music, which had once been a source of comfort, now felt like a siren's call, pulling me towards Eleanor. I tried to resist, but when she walked into the room, dressed in a simple yet elegant dress, I knew I was lost. "Eleanor," I said, my voice strained, "we can't keep doing this." She nodded, her eyes filled with a mix of longing and sorrow. "I know, but I can't stay away from you." The admission hung in the air, and before I knew it, we were in each other's arms, our lips meeting in a desperate, hungry kiss. There was no hesitation this time, no second guessing. We had tried to resist, but the need was too powerful. Our hands roamed over each other's bodies, the heat between us growing with every touch. We stumbled towards the bedroom, our kisses deepening, our breaths coming in short gasps. When we reached the room, we tore at each other's clothes, the urgency of our desire leaving no room for finesse. Eleanor's dress slipped to the floor, and I marveled at the sight of her body a beautiful contrast of softness and strength. I kissed her neck, her collarbone trailing my lips down to her breasts, savoring the taste of her skin. She moaned softly, her fingers tangling in my hair, pulling me closer. We fell onto the bed, our bodies a tangle of limbs and desire. I kissed her deeply, my hands exploring every inch of her, and she responded with equal fervor. The room was filled with the sound of our breathing, our moans, and the music that seemed to echo the rhythm of our passion. "Eleanor," I whispered, my voice hoarse with need, "I want you so much." "I want you too," she replied, her voice trembling. "Please don't stop." I didn't need any further encouragement. I moved over her, our bodies aligning perfectly, and with a gentle yet firm thrust, I entered her. The sensation was overwhelming, a mix of pleasure and emotion that left us both gasping. We moved together, our bodies finding a rhythm that felt both natural and electric. Every touch, every kiss, every movement was a testament to the desire that had been building between us. We lost ourselves in each other, the world outside fading away until there was nothing but the two of us, and the music that seemed to guide our every motion. The climax built slowly, a crescendo of sensation that left us both breathless. When we finally reached the peak, it was like an explosion of pleasure, a release that left us both trembling. We held each other tightly, riding out the waves of ecstasy, our cries of pleasure mingling with the music and the soft patter of rain against the window. Afterwards, we lay in each other's arms, our bodies still humming with the afterglow. Eleanor rested her head on my chest, her breath warm against my skin, and I held her close, savoring the connection we had found once more. But even in the midst of our contentment, I could feel the weight of reality pressing down on us. "Eleanor," I said softly, my voice filled with a mix of regret and longing, "we can't keep doing this. It's not fair to Laura." She sighed, her fingers tracing patterns on my chest. "I know," she replied, her voice tinged with sadness, "but I don't know how to stop." "Neither do I admitted, my heart aching with the truth. "But we have to find a way." She looked up at me, her eyes filled with tears. "I don't want to lose you." You won't, I promised, my voice firm. We'll figure this out, together. She nodded, her expression filled with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. We lay there in silence, the weight of our situation heavy on our minds. The night was still young, and the jazz music continued to play, its smooth rhythms, now a reminder of both our passion and our predicament. As we held each other, I couldn't help but wonder what the future held for us. The connection we shared was too strong to ignore, but the consequences of our actions were too great to overlook. We were caught in a web of desire and duty, and finding a way out seemed impossible. But as the music played on and the rain continued to fall, I knew one thing for certain. No matter what happened, I couldn't let go of Eleanor. She was a part of me now, and our forbidden love was a fire that couldn't be extinguished. The days following our passionate encounter were a blur of confusion and guilt. Eleanor and I avoided each other as much as possible, the weight of our secret threatening to crush us both. We tried to pretend that nothing had happened, but the tension between us was palpable, a constant reminder of our forbidden desire. Laura returned from her trip, blissfully unaware of the turmoil that had taken hold of her home. She was happy and energetic, her presence a stark contrast to the heavy atmosphere that hung over Eleanor and me. Watching her, I felt a pang of guilt so intense it was almost unbearable. She didn't deserve this betrayal, and I knew we had to find a way to put an end to our affair. One evening, while Laura was out with friends, Eleanor and I found ourselves alone in the living room once more. The silence between us was thick, and I could see the same turmoil reflected in her eyes. We both knew that we needed to talk, to find a way to end the madness that had taken hold of us. "Eleanor," I began, my voice strained, "we can't keep doing this. We need to stop." She nodded, her expression filled with sorrow. "I know, it's just so hard." "I understand," I said, my heart aching with the truth of our situation. "But we can't keep hurting Laura like this. It's not fair to her." Eleanor looked down, her fingers twisting nervously. "You're right. We need to find a way to move on, for her sake." The decision was made, but it didn't make it any easier. We knew that we had to distance ourselves, to find a way to suppress the desire that burned between us. It was a painful process, filled with moments of longing and regret, but we were determined to do what was right for Laura. We started by limiting our time together. Eleanor made plans to spend more time with friends, to take up new hobbies, anything to keep herself occupied and away from me. I did the same, throwing myself into work and trying to stay out of the house as much as possible. It was a difficult adjustment, but slowly we began to find a new normal. One afternoon, Laura suggested a family outing to a nearby park. She was excited about the idea, and despite the tension between Eleanor and me, we both agreed. The day was sunny and warm, a perfect contrast to the heavy atmosphere that had plagued us for weeks. As we walked through the park, Laura holding my hand and chatting animatedly, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe we could find a way to move past this, to heal the wounds we had caused. Eleanor walked a few steps behind us, her expression thoughtful. I glanced back at her, and for a moment our eyes met. There was still a spark of something there, a connection that couldn't be denied, but it was tempered by the determination to do what was right. We both knew that this was the only way forward. As the weeks turned into months, the distance between Eleanor and me grew. We still saw each other regularly, but the intensity of our interactions had lessened. We were careful to keep things friendly and appropriate, never letting our guard down. It was difficult, but we were committed to protecting Laura and preserving our family. One evening, as we sat in the living room watching a movie, Laura snuggled up next to me, her head resting on my shoulder. I glanced over at Eleanor, who was sitting on the other side of the room, a book in her lap. She looked up and met my gaze, a small, sad smile on her lips. There was a silent understanding between us, a recognition of the sacrifice we had made for the greater good. As the movie played on, I found myself reflecting on the journey we had been through, the passion and desire that had consumed us, the guilt and sorrow that had followed, and finally, the determination to do what was right. It hadn't been easy, and there were still moments when the longing resurfaced, but we had found a way to move forward. Eleanor and I had learned to coexist, to maintain a respectful distance while still being there for Laura. It was a delicate balance, but we were making it work. Our love for Laura was stronger than our desire for each other, and that was what kept us going. One day, while Laura was at work, Eleanor and I found ourselves alone in the house. The atmosphere was tense, the unspoken memories of our past encounters hanging in the air. We had avoided being alone together for months, but now, There was no escaping it. "Eleanor," I said softly, breaking the silence, "I want you to know that I will always care for you, but we can't let what happened destroy our family." She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "I know, and I will always care for you too, but we have to stay strong for Laura." We shared a brief, poignant hug, a silent farewell to the passion that had once consumed us. It was a moment of closure, a recognition that while our desire was undeniable, our commitment to Laura was unbreakable. As we pulled away, there was a sense of peace between us, a new understanding that we could move forward without the burden of our secret. The months turned into years, and while the memory of our affair never completely faded, it became a distant echo, a reminder of a time when our desires had nearly destroyed us. We had found a way to coexist, to be a family again, and while it hadn't been easy, it had been worth it. Eleanor and I remained close, but our relationship had changed. We were no longer lovers, but we had found a way to be friends, to support each other while keeping our boundaries clear. It was a new kind of intimacy, one built on mutual respect and the shared goal of protecting the woman we both loved. As the years passed, the weight of our secret grew lighter, and we were able to look back on that time with a sense of understanding and acceptance. It was a part of our history, but it didn't define us. We had made mistakes, but we had also found a way to move forward, to heal and to grow. Years passed, and the intensity of our forbidden passion gradually faded into a bittersweet memory. The secret Eleanor and I shared became a silent agreement, a pact to protect Laura and preserve the family we had nearly destroyed. Our love for Laura was our anchor, guiding us through the turbulent waters of our past. Laura remained blissfully unaware of the storm that had once raged beneath the surface. She flourished in her career, and our marriage grew stronger with each passing day. Our shared commitment to her was the glue that held us together, and in that shared purpose, we found solace. Eleanor and I maintained a respectful distance, our interactions polite and cordial. The spark between us still lingered, a quiet reminder of what once was, but we had learned to suppress it. Our bond had transformed into something more enduring, built on mutual respect and the shared goal of protecting Laura. One evening, as we sat in the living room, Laura excused herself to take a call from a friend. Eleanor and I were left alone, the silence between us comfortable yet charged with unspoken understanding. The jazz music that once ignited our passion played softly in the background, a familiar yet distant melody. "Eleanor," I said, breaking the silence, "I've been thinking a lot about the past, about us." She looked at me, her eyes reflecting a depth of emotion that only years of shared history could create. "I have too," she admitted softly. "It's hard not to." "I want you to know," I continued, my voice steady, "that despite everything, I don't regret what happened between us. It was a difficult time, but it taught me a lot about love and loyalty." Eleanor smiled, a touch of sadness in her eyes. "I feel the same way. It was a mistake, but it also showed me how deeply we can care for someone. We've both grown from it." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of our words settling over us. There was a sense of closure, a mutual understanding that we had both found peace with our past. The jazz music played on, a soothing reminder of the journey we had been through. Laura returned to the room, her presence bringing light and warmth. She sat between us, her smile radiant, and I felt a surge of love for her. She was the reason we had found the strength to move forward, the anchor that had kept us grounded. As the years continued to pass, Eleanor and I grew closer in a different way. Our bond was no longer built on forbidden desire, but on a deep, abiding friendship. We became each other's confidants, supporting one another through the challenges life threw at us. Our shared history gave us a unique understanding of each other, a connection that was both profound and unbreakable. Laura and I celebrated many milestones together, anniversaries, promotions, and eventually, the arrival of our first child. Eleanor was a constant presence in our lives, her love for her daughter and grandchild evident in every interaction. She became an integral part of our family, her support and wisdom invaluable. One summer evening, as we gathered for a family barbecue in the backyard, I looked around at the people I loved. Laura was laughing with our child, her joy infectious. Eleanor stood nearby, her eyes filled with pride and contentment. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the scene, and the familiar strains of jazz floated through the air. I realized then that despite the challenges and mistakes of the past, we had all found a way to create a beautiful life together. Our journey had been difficult, but it had led us to a place of peace and fulfillment. The love we shared, though complicated and sometimes painful, had ultimately brought us closer and made us stronger. Eleanor caught my eye and smiled, a silent acknowledgement of the path we had traveled together. I returned her smile, grateful for the bond we had forged and the lessons we had learned. Our story was one of growth, forgiveness, and enduring love, and it had shaped us into the people we were today. As the night drew on and the stars began to twinkle overhead, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. Life had a way of taking unexpected turns, but it was those twists and turns that made our journey so rich and meaningful. We had faced our mistakes, learned from them, and found a way to move forward with grace and dignity. The smooth rhythms of jazz continued to play, a soundtrack to our lives, reminding us of the passion and complexity that had brought us to this moment. And as I looked at the faces of the people I loved, I knew that despite everything, we had created something beautiful together, a family built on love, resilience, and unbreakable bonds. And so, our story continued, not defined by the mistakes of the past, but by the strength of our love and the promise of the future.